We've all seen it before in temples, stained glass, cave walls, and modern tattoos. A simple circle, then another interlaced, intricate, infinite. But few ever ask what it truly means. What no one tells you is that this ancient geometric symbol may not be decoration but a key that opens the hidden structure of reality itself. They say that in the beginning, there was only void, but even in the void, there was a rhythm, a pulse, a breath, a movement. From that sacred movement came form. From form came pattern, and from pattern came meaning. Every ancient civilization, scattered across time and separated by oceans and mountains, seemed to know this truth. They etched it into stone, encoded it in temples, whispered it in rituals, and buried it in sarcophagi, the belief that behind the ever-shifting illusion of the world was a divine design. Not a god with a beard, nor a throne in the sky, but a shape, a symbol, a geometry. One that repeated in petals and pyramids, in galaxies and genomes. A geometry that did not just explain the world, it was the world. The blueprint of breath, time, and spirit. Tonight, we do not just look at it, we step into it. Let us begin where all things do at the first circle. Before the scriptures, before the tools, before the very idea of civilization, there was the circle. It begins with a single point in emptiness, a dot, then motion, a rotation, a pulse spiraling outward, and from that sacred dance emerges the circle perfect, whole, containing everything and nothing at once. Now, place another circle the same size so that its edge touches the center of the first. What you get is not mere overlap. You get a vesica piscis, the almond-shaped window that has mystified mystics for millennia. This simple gesture, repeated again and again, forms the core of a symbol now recognized across the world as the flower of life, 6 petals, 12 petals, 24, expanding outward like a cosmic bloom. But why is it everywhere? From the Osirian temple in Abydos, Egypt, etched with laser precision into granite over 6,000 years ago, to Chinese cosmological diagrams buried with emperors, to the sacred yantras of Hinduism, the hexagrams of Judaism, and the crop circles of rural England. This pattern persists, unchanged, unexplained. And yet something in us remembers it. Children draw it instinctively in circles on the sand. Tribes that never met traced it in ritual dances. Mathematicians rediscover it while sketching equations of light and resonance. Why? Because geometry, unlike words, transcends language. It is the unspoken syntax of creation, the eternal glyph that reality uses to describe itself to itself. The flower of life is not merely a drawing. It is the interference pattern of consciousness, made visible. And still beneath its beauty lies a code. Look closely. Within it lives the seed of life, the tree of life, the egg of life, all nested like esoteric Russian dolls, waiting for the one who dares to ask not what this symbol is, but why it was placed there again and again, across deserts and jungles, ruins and scrolls. To the ancient mind, nothing was accidental. To carve something into stone was an act of immortality. So when the Maya, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and the Dogon all chose this geometry without ever meeting it, was not for aesthetic pleasure. It was a message, a map, a reminder that the universe is not chaos, but cosmos, not a mistake, but music, and that beneath every storm, every heartbeat, every turning of the stars, there is a design, a pattern behind all things. But what lies beyond the pattern? What is it pointing us toward? The next circle reveals the code. Trace the petals slowly. Let your eyes follow the arcs, soft, symmetrical, unfolding in gentle ripples. There is something hypnotic here, something ancient, as though this pattern is not being seen, but remembered. This is the flower of life, sacred geometry's most enduring sigil, but its power is not in how it looks. It is in what it contains. Hidden within this field of circles is the seed of life, 7 circles, like the 7 days of creation. 7 sounds in the scale, 7 chakras in the spine, 7 steps the Buddha took at birth. This is not coincidence, it is correspondence. What ancient initiates discovered was this: the same geometry that governs the petals of a lotus also governs the orbit of planets. The same ratios that describe the spirals of galaxies appear in the splitting of a zygote. The micro echoes the macro not as metaphor, but as math. And within this flower lies the code of it all. The egg of life, a hidden lattice of spheres, maps the structure of cellular division. This is embryonic geometry, the architecture of becoming. It is how 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8, a sacred rhythm embedded in flesh. The fruit of life, another veiled layer, contains within it the Metatron's cube, an esoteric form known to mystics, alchemists, and Kabbalists. From Metatron's cube, every Platonic solid emerges the tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron, the 5 elemental forms of classical creation. To the ancient mind, these were not just shapes. They were the building blocks of all that exists: earth, air, fire, water, ether woven into form by the silent hand of the cosmos. Even Leonardo da Vinci studied this symbol obsessively, drawing and redrawing it in his private notebooks, attempting to decode its divine proportions. He was not alone. In the Egyptian temple of Osiris, it was etched as if by laser. In the Forbidden City, it's hidden in imperial tiles. In Kabbalistic diagrams, it connects the Sephirot, the 10 emanations of the divine. Even in modern science, the symbol eerily mirrors the molecular patterns of life itself: carbon structures, DNA spirals, atomic resonance. This is sacred encryption, a language older than alphabets, a cipher of creation written not in ink, but in vibration. And still, most walk past it, see only circles, pretty, patterned. But the mystics, they saw motion within stillness. They knew every petal is a portal, every arc an algorithm, every overlapping ring a mirror reflecting an eternal truth. That form is not the opposite of spirit, but spirit crystallized. To decode the flower is to remember what we already are: resonant beings, woven from geometry and light. But geometry was never just about forms. It was about God, not the bearded skyfather of dogma, but the silent, intelligent architect who speaks only in symmetry. So what happens when geometry becomes divinity? The temples will show us. Stone remembers. Unlike words that fade or parchment that burns, stone endures, and in its endurance, it carries intention. Sacred geometry, when carved into stone, becomes more than symbol. It becomes ritual made permanent. And across the surface of this earth, from the mountains of Peru to the sands of Egypt to the sacred valleys of Tibet, one truth emerges. Geometry was once worshipped, not as abstraction, but as God. In the temples of ancient Kemet, the architecture wasn't built to house the divine. It was the divine. Every angle, every proportion, every alignment whispered a message: as above, so below. The Great Pyramid of Giza, not a tomb, but a tuning fork of light and mass. Its base aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree. Its proportions encode the golden ratio, p, and the speed of light, all within blocks of limestone. Coincidence or communion? Its geometry was not decoration, it was invocation. The ancients did not design temples. They revealed them, channeling what already existed in higher realms, bringing down the divine into stone. They believed certain patterns could alter reality. Aligning form to sacred ratios allowed spirit to descend to inhabit space, to awaken the soul. Walk into a Gothic cathedral, and you'll feel it still. The pointed arches, the rose windows, all echoing the flower of life. A space where sound echoes like prayer and light falls like revelation. The masons who built them weren't mere craftsmen. They were initiates trained in the language of the invisible. They knew a circle wasn't just a circle, it was the womb of the cosmos. A triangle wasn't just three sides, it was the trinity of becoming body, soul, and spirit. The hexagon harmony, the spiral growth, the golden mean, the divine fingerprint. Even the Bible, when decoded through the lens of geometry, reveals hidden maps. In Genesis, the 6 days of creation geometrically mapped form the seed of life. In Revelation, the New Jerusalem descends as a perfect cube, its dimensions echoing the cube within Metatron's pattern. The ancients saw in geometry a bridge between spirit and structure, between idea and incarnation. They believed that to create in harmony with divine proportion was to co-create with the universe itself. And then, we forgot. The age of steel replaced the age of stone. Function replaced mystery. We built taller, faster, cheaper, but emptier. Geometry became math, math became utility, and the divine was buried in blueprints. But the patterns didn't die. They whispered from the mandalas of Tibetan monks, from the sand paintings of Navajo shamans, from the floor tiles of Moorish mosques, calling, always calling to the deeper intelligence woven into the world. And so, the question arises, were these symbols merely cultural echoes, or were they responding to something deeper, something universal? Perhaps the answer lies not in the symbols themselves, but in the vibration they awaken. Because before form, there was frequency, and geometry is simply sound, made visible. Next, we descend into the grid beneath reality itself, where frequency becomes shape, and shape becomes soul. Close your eyes. Now imagine a single tone, pure, vibrating through still air. Now imagine a second tone joining it, and then a third. As these invisible sounds meet, something astonishing happens. Patterns begin to emerge. Sand dances on metal plates, forming stars and flowers. Water trembles into sacred geometry. Matter organizes itself into symmetry, as if sound itself remembers how to draw. This is cymatics, the science of visible sound. But to the mystics, it is something more proof that vibration precedes form. Before the circle was drawn, before the temple was built, before the embryo divided, there was frequency, there was sound, and geometry was its shadow. We live not on solid ground, but on a vibrational grid, an unseen lattice humming just beyond perception, and the flower of life. It is the imprint of that grid, the residue of vibration frozen into form. In quantum mechanics, this echoes again. Particles, when unobserved, exist as waves patterns of probability. Only when witnessed do they crystallize into location. Form emerges from frequency from intent, from observation. The universe is not built of bricks. It is built of waves intersecting, interfering, harmonizing. And sacred geometry is what those wave patterns look like when they touch. In every crystal lattice, in every snowflake, in every sunflower spiral, you are witnessing sound, slowed into matter. This is why sacred symbols were not drawn, but sounded. The Om of the Vedas, the chants of the Gnostics, the vowel tones of the Egyptians, each syllable a key, each intonation a geometry, each chant a constructive resonance. The ancients understood to speak was to shape, to chant was to create. And what of the brain? Within its folds, modern science has discovered rhythmic electrical patterns, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. Each frequency a different state of consciousness. Meditation alters the geometry of brain waves. Prayer restructures neural maps. Even memory dances in frequencies. Is the mind a receiver, or is it a geometric emitter? This brings us to the greatest mystery, that not only is geometry beneath reality, it is within us. Our very DNA coils in spirals of phi. Our cochlea, the organ of hearing, follows the golden ratio. Our hearts beat in Fibonacci sequences. Our eyes perceive symmetry as beauty, because we are made of it. You are not an observer of the grid. You are part of it. You are it. And if the symbol lives in you, then who or what first placed it there? Perhaps there were beings before memory, architects not of buildings, but of worlds, preservers of the grid, keepers of the pattern. And if so, where did they go? There are stories whispered in the desert wind, legends carved into the bones of mountains, of a people, or perhaps something more than people, who walked the earth when time was still young. They are known by many names: the sages of Zep Tepi, the 7 rishis of the east, the watchers of Enoch, the Apkallu of Sumer, the Viracocha of the Andes, the shining ones. Different cultures, same archetype. Beings who emerged suddenly, bearing knowledge no civilization should have had knowledge of the stars, of healing, of metallurgy, and above all, of geometry. They built without cranes, aligned without satellites, encoded the earth with temples, pyramids, and shrines, each structure humming in harmonic resonance with celestial bodies. They were not inventing geometry, they were remembering it. Across continents, these mythic architects left behind more than stone. They left glyphs of light encoded into the flower of life, the tree of life, and the cube of Metatron. In Abydos, the flower of life is etched with impossible precision. No chisel marks, no deterioration, not engraved, burned into granite, as if by sound or light. In the Osirian, water flows in sacred ratios through underground chambers, chambers whose frequency echoes into the body like a song remembered by the bones. In Angkor Wat, the layout mirrors the constellation Draco. In Teotihuacan, the city grid mirrors Orion's belt. In Stonehenge, solstices split shadows with uncanny precision. This is not architecture. This is astral choreography. How did they know? Mainstream history tells us they were primitives, but the symbols say otherwise. They speak of a knowledge continuum passed down, hidden, protected. When the libraries of Alexandria burned, not all was lost. The initiates went underground. Through mystery schools, through the Freemasons, through the Essenes, through whispered lines of priesthood, Kabbalah, alchemy, and sacred science, the architects endured. Sometimes they were artists, sometimes scientists, sometimes madmen drawing circles in sand while the world mocked. But always, they carried the pattern. Even today, echoes remain. In crop circles too complex for pranksters, in children's visions during fevers, in dreams where glowing forms dance in perfect symmetry. The question is not whether they existed. The question is whether you remember them. Because what if the architects never truly left? What if they live within you as dormant geometry, waiting? And when that pattern awakens, you do not just see the symbol, you become it. Now we arrive at the threshold, where memory becomes mirror, and the pattern points inward. You've seen the symbol etched in stone. You've followed it through temples, tombs, and tides of forgotten time. But now close your eyes, for the next place it leads is within. The ancient sages spoke of a temple not built with hands, a sanctuary more sacred than any shrine. They called it the microcosm, the inner universe, and they said, as the pattern is in heaven, so it is in the soul. Inside you is a geometry, not metaphorical, but literal, a divine architecture, humming beneath thought, breath, blood. Your heart pulses in harmonic ratios. Your lungs expand in Fibonacci rhythm. Your brain, a cathedral of golden angles and spiraled circuits. Even the pineal gland, that tiny, mystical eye between the brows, sits at the perfect center between the hemispheres, aligned along the axis of the soul. It is here that the ancient mystics said the soul enters and exits the body, and it is here that the flower of life begins to bloom. But this is not just biology. This is initiation. The labyrinths of old were not designed to trap. They were paths of meditation spiraling inward, not to escape the world, but to reconnect with its source. Each petal of the flower is a step inward, a veil lifted, a forgotten language recalled. Symbols are mirrors, and the flower of life is the clearest of all. It doesn't show what you are. It shows what you were before you forgot. A child of pattern, a spark of symmetry, a fractal of the divine. To awaken the inner architect is to remember your role not as observer, but as creator. You are not just walking through the geometry, you are drawing it with every word, thought, and feeling. Each emotion ripples through the field. Each intention reconfigures the grid. Each act of love restores symmetry to a fragmented world. This is the secret the ancients guarded. Not that the flower of life was powerful, but that you are. They buried it in temples because they feared what would happen if a soul remembered too soon, too fast. Unready minds can shatter when shown divine proportion. But a prepared heart, it can reshape reality. The Renaissance artists knew this. Their divine paintings weren't just art, they were revelations in pigment. The positioning of fingers, eyes, halos all in golden ratios, an offering to the soul's memory. The yogis knew this. Each asana, a geometric invocation, each breath, a vibration tuning the inner chord. The Kabbalists knew this. Their tree of life was not just cosmic, it was anatomical. Each sephira, a chamber of the self. And now you know it too. So ask yourself, what sacred shape is your life taking? What patterns do your days carve into time? What grid do your thoughts illuminate? Because once the architect within you awakens, there is no going back. And yet, one mystery remains. Why this symbol? Why here? Why now? What was the flower always trying to tell us? Its last petal holds the answer. The final petal. You trace its arc like a fingertip across time through myths and temples, dreams and DNA. It completes the bloom, and in that completion, something opens. Not just understanding, remembrance, because the flower of life was never meant to be worshipped. It was meant to be used as a map, a mirror, a memory trigger. Its purpose was not decoration, but activation. It calls not to your intellect, but to the oldest part of you, the part that remembers the stars before they had names, the part that sang worlds into being long before language. This is the final revelation. The symbol was never meant to show you how the world was made. It was to remind you that you are a world maker. Each circle, each pattern, each sacred ratio is not a relic of forgotten gods, but a living instruction for remembering your divine design. It shows you that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter. Matter is a byproduct of consciousness. That time is not a line, it is a spiral. That you are not a mistake of chaos, but an echo of cosmic harmony. The flower of life appears in every ancient culture not because of coincidence, but because of communion. It was the universal language before Babel, a glyph passed between sages, seers, and stars, not through trade or conquest, but through dream, trance, soul echo. It was planted here like a seed waiting to bloom in the collective mind. And now, as the world forgets itself in noise and haste, the symbol returns. On walls, in visions, through art, sound, and geometry, it taps gently on the door of your perception, asking, will you remember what you are? Will you walk the path back inward? Will you become the pattern again? Because once you do, the separation dissolves. You see the circle in the eye, the spiral in the breath, the sacred triangle in love, will, and wisdom. And you realize, the veil was never real. The key was always here. The truth was never hidden. We simply stopped looking with sacred eyes. So now, the final truth. The flower of life was never just geometry. It was your invitation. To remember, to realign, to return, and perhaps, just perhaps, to create again from the center of the circle,